Hi guys, it's Allie with SUPboardguide.com, and today we're going to be reviewing the Sea Gods Skylla. It's designed to be a cross between a touring board and an all-around board, and it's a newer addition to Sea Gods line. Our experience on it has differed a little bit depending on the paddler, but in general it's quick, it's maneuverable, and it has a lot of stability. It's also constructed a little bit differently than the rest of Sea Gods boards, making the Skylla pretty light without losing anything in stiffness. And then it also has some gorgeous artwork on it, as is pretty typical of Sea Gods boards. But overall, we really like it. It's beautiful and we're excited to dive in. Before we get too deep into the review of the Sea Gods Skylla, we first want to talk about what comes included with this board. So first of all is the SUP backpack. We really like this bag. It's super roomy. I love that it has wheels and it has plenty of handles on the top. There's one on the side, there's two on the front. So you can grab it literally anywhere to throw it into your trunk, pull it out, whatever you need to do. It's just super convenient. I also really like these bungees on the front. You can slip a towel into them and change of clothes, whatever you need. And then as for the rest of the kit, let's see how fast I can get it open. So just unzips, and then also included is your 3-piece paddle. This is one of the nicer paddles we've seen included in the SUP kit. It's fully carbon fiber. It has a teardrop blade. It is a really good quality, especially to come with your board in the first place. And then they've also included a single chamber hand pump. To be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of single chamber pumps or hand pumps in general, but as of this past season, Sea Gods did add an electric pump to their accessories, which is really nice. I would recommend upgrading to an electric pump, but if not, the hand pump will work fine in the meantime. It's just a little bit harder to get your board up to 18 PSI. It's not impossible, you'll just get a good workout in the meantime. And then they've also included an 11-foot swivel leash with this board. I really like the Sea Gods leash. It's really well padded. I also really like that it's full swivel at the head and at the attachment to your board, so you're not going to trip over this. And then of course there's the Skylla itself. Rolls up pretty standard as far as inflatable boards go, but the Skylla is pretty light. It's only about 19.5 pounds. So overall this kit isn't too bad to carry on its own. Let me just lay it down. And then the last piece of the kit, arguably the most important, is your included fin. The fins this year for Sea Gods are these like flexible fins, which is nice. You don't have to worry about damage if you hit it on a rock or if you get caught in shallower water. It's not going to hurt your fin box either. Another really nice part about Sea Gods fins is that they opted for the kumano system, which fits into a US fin box, but it doesn't require any tools, which is super nice. I personally lose a lot of the really small tools. If you're not that person, probably doesn't matter to you, but for those of us that do lose things, the kumano fin is really nice. So overall, a really high quality kit. I really like the roomy bag. I like that it has tons of pockets, and in general, I'm really happy with it. So now we're going to inflate the Skylla and dive into the rest of this review. I'm not going to be using their included single chamber hand pump. I'm going to be using Sea Gods electric pump instead. They do have a rechargeable pump available on their site, which seems like it should be really nice because it adds a lot of portability to it. You don't have to be tied to your car. We still need to do a lot more testing on this pump to determine where it stands as far as the other ones available in the market. But so far it's been really fast to charge, at least. So I'm just gonna turn it on. And then I'm gonna set it to 16 because that's the highest that a portable pump will go. The Sea Gods boards are rated between 14 and 18 PSI, and then they have a maximum of 20. So if you want a little bit more firmness, you might have to get it up to that 18 PSI, but it does perform fine at 16, which is what their pump can go to. So we're just gonna set it, have it hooked up, and then all you have to do is hit the power button and you should be good to go. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the construction of the Sea Gods Skylla. It's a little bit different than the rest of their boards, but we really like it. So what they've done is they've made the inner drop stitch a cross woven drop stitch. So what that means is that the threads on the inside that hold the shape of the Skylla together when you inflate it are oriented in an X fashion as opposed to a linear drop stitch. What that does is it allows Sea Gods to use a lot less material to achieve the same or a better level of stiffness on the Skylla, making it lighter overall. And then the woven term comes from the actual fabric layer of the drop stitch. So that's a woven material as opposed to a knitted. If they had used the knitted, they would get a lot of micro air gaps. That's how you get a lot of bend in the board, and it doesn't create as uniform as a bond with the PVC that they layer on top. Since they have decided to use the woven material, they don't have any of those issues. The board is stiffer, they have a more uniform bond overall, making for a more durable board, a more rigid board. It's just a lot better. And then as for the PVC on the outside, that's where Sea Gods' term ultralight fusion comes in. So what they do is they bond the PVC to the fabric in a liquid state, and then they allow it to dry, creating that airtight and watertight seal around the drop stitch fabric. And then once that is dried, they apply the PVC to the rails and they reinforce them with strips of seam tape, so you're not going to have any seam failures with the Sea Gods board. They're so confident in it that they back their boards with a lifetime warranty against any manufacturer defects, which is the longest one that we've seen. It shows a lot of confidence, but more importantly, it shows that they don't want their boards to end up in a landfill, which is really important. They've made a pretty strong pledge to the environment, and they do like to emphasize that, and we're really happy about it as well. We think they've done a great job with the Skylla. I'm interested to see how they incorporate some aspects of the Skylla's construction into the rest of their boards, but for now, I'm really happy with this new addition. So let's get into some of the features on the Skylla. It looks like it would be pretty minimalistic, but they have added quite a bit to this board. So starting at the tail, they have the rear carry handle. Helps a lot when you're launching the board into the water or pulling it off the top of your car. They have the D-ring for your leash, which is probably your most important attachment. And then they have two integrated action mounts in the rear cargo area. This is the nice spot to hook up like a GoPro, cup holder, anything that you can screw into there will essentially fit. Up on the middle of the board, they have the center carry handle, and then these four D-rings for their kayak seat attachment, which is available for a separate purchase, but a pretty cool inclusion. You can just switch up your activity a little bit. And then up on the front cargo area, they also have two integrated action mounts up here, so that's 4 in total. Again, good spot for a cup holder, GoPro, anything you can fit in there. They've added these two safety grab handles. If you are falling off of your board, you can always grab these. They're also just another spot to hold on to when you're carrying it, moving it around. And then all the way up at the nose, they have this front grab handle. It helps when you're beaching your board after you come in, when you're finished paddling. But overall, you still have a lot of space on your deck with all of the versatility of these features. So I think they've done a really good job here with balancing the two between having space and cutting weight and having some versatility in your paddling session. So we're pretty happy with it. We also want to go into a little bit more detail about the paddle that's included with Sea Gods boards. It is one of the nicer paddles that we've seen included in a SUP kit. So the whole shaft is carbon fiber, and then they have this nylon teardrop blade. This is kind of a blade shape that you would see in ocean paddling more so, or surfing, something like that, but it does work really well in flat water too. What it does is the teardrop grabs a lot more water than the smaller rectangular blade shapes. So it's kind of more like leisurely if you're paddling on a lake or flat water, and then if you're trying to catch waves or wake in the ocean, you can grab a lot more water. You're gonna get a lot more power out of each individual stroke. And then as far as the heights go, I'm 5'2", and it adjusts down to me perfectly fine. It'll adjust down a little bit lower for people even a little bit shorter than me, and then it'll go all the way up to about 225 centimeters for our taller people out there, but it does fit a really wide range of paddlers. I've liked that they added this clamp on the bottom section. It helps stop any like wiggle that you would feel in the connection points. And then they've also added a groove onto the back of the paddle blade, and that stops your handle from being twisted as you're paddling. So it's a really nice attention to detail. It also helps you when you're putting the paddle together to make sure you're putting your handle on the right way, because I've made that mistake before, put the handle on the wrong way, and then it just feels weird while you're paddling. So I like that they've done that. I've liked that they upgraded the clamps. As for weight, it doesn't feel super heavy. It's a little bit heavier than full carbon fiber paddles, which you would expect because of the nylon blade and the addition of the clamps. But I think that the benefits of it far outweigh any added weight that you get, and it's not super noticeable. I really enjoy this paddle, and I was super happy to see a carbon fiber paddle in general come included. Another thing that we want to focus on with Sea Gods boards specifically is that they try to use locally sourced artwork for each of their designs. So the Skylla specifically was done by Helvetica. They're a couple out of Ontario. They specialize in graphic design and illustration, but they've kind of combined those two practices. They've won quite a bit of awards in that space, so it is a really great piece on this board. They designed it after the hippocampus, which is more known in Greek mythology as is the term Skylla. I like that Sea Gods tries to add a little bit of story onto their boards and ties that in to how they look. It's really eye-catching. We get tons of comments on it on the water, but more importantly, it's great that they give back to their community, try to support local artists in that space. Another thing we want to focus on for Sea Gods boards, and the Skylla in particular, is that they've changed their fins to be these flexible material as opposed to like a harder plastic. So what that does is it stops your fin from breaking if you hit it on a rock, or it stops your fin box from being damaged if you get stuck in a shallower part of water, anything like that. It adds a little bit of durability overall. Another thing that I really like about the Sea Gods fins is that they use a kumano system. So what that means is that these fins fit into a US fin box, but they don't require any of the tools. So the kumano system works off of these pressure plugs, and when you slide your fin into the box, all you do is apply a little bit of pressure and it just pops in. It's pretty secure. I've never knocked one out. If you would like it to be even more secure than just the pressure plugs, they include a screw plate with the fin as well, if that's what you're used to. But the best thing about the US fin box is that you can switch to any fin that you would prefer as long as it fits. And then to take it out, you just apply a little bit of pressure, it slides right out. We also want to note that if you have these plugs a little bit misaligned in the holes, it does make it a lot harder to get the fin in. So if you're having problems like that, I would just recommend checking your plugs, making sure that they're lined up correctly in the fin, and then you should be good to go. Another thing about this fin is that the Skylla, the Kados, and the Cartamarina all come with an included hatchet style fin, which is this style as opposed to like the dolphin style that comes on more all-around boards. It helps a lot with tracking, which we'll get into in a minute, but in general, I like that this fin is really durable and I like that it's super convenient. So to get into the performance of the Skylla, we're gonna start with stability. It's a deciding factor as to whether or not you're gonna have fun, especially if you're just learning. If you can't stand up, you're just not gonna have a good time. But the Skylla, it's 11 by 33, so it's meant to be a cross between a touring board and an all-around. It would be super stable as a touring board being 33 inches wide, and even for an all-around, it is definitely on the more stable side. Most all-arounds are about 32, so that extra width on the Skylla does add a little bit of side-to-side stability or secondary stability. And then I think the construction of it plays into that as well. You do have a good bit of weight support with the Skylla. Justin had on the 2 weight sacks or the water sacks. They end up being about 40 pounds. He's about 180, so at 260, he didn't have any issues with this board. There was a little bit of loss in stability, but not super noticeable. So I think as a solo paddler, if you do get up to the Skylla's 350-pound weight capacity, I think that's the point that you would start to notice a big stability difference. But even at the 260 or the 240 range for a solo paddler, you're gonna be good to go. I also think it helps that they kept that tail a little bit more boxed off than a touring board would be. It does decrease your speed a little bit, which we'll get into in a second, but it adds a lot of surface area on the water and a little bit more volume to the board, making it more stable. I think it kind of can serve as like an adventure board. I have no problem loading this board up with gear, with my dog, whatever I want to bring with it. So as for stability goes, the Skylla is great. We have no problems with it. So the next thing that we want to talk about in the performance section is maneuverability. That's where the all-around touring cross kind of comes into play. The Skylla is a little bit more maneuverable than a classic touring board or their 12.6 Carta-Marina. It's a little bit less maneuverable than an all-around board. I think that's partly because of the length. It's 11 feet long, which is a little bit more than most all-arounds. And then I also think the hatchet fin comes into play as well. It just grabs a decent bit of water as you're trying to turn, which is what it's meant to do. It's supposed to help with tracking, so that's fine. And because it's a US fin box, you can switch it out if you want a little bit more maneuverability. But as far as like even just casual turns, the Skylla does turn pretty easily. It's only about 19.5 pounds, so you're not redirecting a ton of weight. It's just not quite as quick as some sportier all-arounds, which I think is fine. I don't see any problem with that. For step back turns, it's a little bit more challenging to sink the tail on the Skylla just because it's boxed off. For stability, not impossible. And to be honest, I don't think most people would be doing a step back turn on this board. I don't think that's what it's intended for. So I'm also fine with that. I think the maneuverability is just one of those areas that you have to balance with a hybrid board, and I think that Sea Gods did a great job. So speed and tracking, I think, is another area that you kind of have to balance with a hybrid board specifically. It's one of those areas where it tracks better than a typical all-around, not quite as well as a true touring board, and that doesn't surprise us at all given what it's made for. As a smaller paddler though, being 33 inches wide, it is a little bit wide for me to keep really good form when I'm paddling the Skylla, and that's kind of the determinant of whether or not your board is going to track well. Even paddling more casually, it is pretty forgiving. It tracks decently well. You do have to switch sides more frequently than the Carta-Marina or other dedicated touring SUPs, but that's to be expected, and I don't think it's really that noticeable. As for its speed, again, it's a little bit slower than a normal touring board, a little bit faster than a normal all-around. So it kind of just sits right in the middle, which is exactly where it's supposed to be. It's decently quick. The weight plays into that as well, being only 19.5 pounds. It gets going pretty easily, and then it'll sustain its pace as long as you keep paddling it but it does feel really nice to paddle. The handling is good. I think the stiffness comes into play. You don't have any changes in the rocker while you're paddling due to any flex. If you load it up with weight in the front, you're gonna slow down a little bit, but again, that's to be expected. As for this trade-off with the speed and tracking for a hybrid board, I think Sea Gods again did a phenomenal job. So to wrap up this review, being a newer addition to the Sea Gods lineup, we've been super happy with how the Skylla has performed for us. They've definitely had to make a bit of a balancing act happen by trying to combine a touring board and an all-around board, which we've seen happen with other similar hybrids on the market. But I think Sea Gods has done the best job so far for a hybrid board that I've seen. It's quick, it's maneuverable, it tracks well, it has a decently high weight capacity, and the construction is really solid. So I think if this is the start for the Skylla, I think they are on their way to making a really cool board option. I think it works really well as sort of a solo board. If you're a larger paddler, you're getting up to that 240, 260 range, getting closer to the weight capacity. If you are a smaller paddler, I think it works really well, sort of like a touring adventure board that you can load up with gear, that type of thing. The Skylla is kind of just a jack of all trades, and I've been really pleased with it. If you found this review helpful, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, or read through our written review, which you'll also find a link to in the description, as well as a link to buy the Skylla. I'm Allie with SUPboardguide.com. Have fun. We'll see you on the water.